Good evening, everyone. It's 6:33 by my clock, and I'll call the meeting to order. First up, we'll do a roll call. Cindy?
Here.
Jason?
Here.
Leonard?
Here.
Heather?
Here.
Okay. This meeting is being recorded. The meeting of the Board of Trustees of the Village of Enosburg Falls is being conducted electronically in order to assure the safety of all attendees and to maintain compliance with Governor Scott's executive order per H681 signed into law March 30th, 2020, Section 6. There's a temporary suspension of designated physical meeting location requirements of Vermont's open meeting law, VSA Section 312A1. In order to ensure that all attendees can hear clearly, your audio may be muted. When you wish to speak, you can raise your hand in the participant list or by submitting a chat request, or if you called in, by pressing *9. Once acknowledged by the chair, please clearly state your name and then proceed with your comment or question. Please remember that when unmuted, all participants can hear any sounds in your environment. Again, this meeting is being recorded. Okay, first up on the agenda, modifications and changes. Does anybody have anything to add or change? Hearing none, we'll move on to public comment. Is there anybody here from the public that wishes to speak tonight? If so, please raise your hand. Jim, do you have your hand raised? Yeah. You're muted.
Yes, I do. I think we're on the agenda, but that's really all I want to cover tonight, I think.
Yeah, you are on the agenda, Jim, under the ER report.
Yep. Thank you.
Sam, I'm seeing no other hands raised.
Okay, so we'll move on to review and approval for the minutes, February 9th, 2021. Did everyone have a chance to look those over? And if nobody saw any errors or omissions, I'll hear a motion to accept them.
I make the motion to accept them.
Leonard has the first. Do I have a second?
A second.
Hello. Thank you.
Hello. Okay, Jason with a second. All those in favor of accepting the minutes, say aye.
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 Those opposed, nay. All right, it's unanimous. Okay, Jim.
Sam, I'm sorry. Can you repeat the first and the second for that?
Leonard first. Jason had the second.
Thank you.
Good evening, Jim.
Hi, how you doing?
Good.
I'm pretty sure Tim is in the bottom right corner. Yes, Tim?
Yes, I'm on.
Good evening.
Okay.
Hello, Sam.
Well, Tim and I are tag teaming to follow up tonight. I think pretty much about the Pearly block. From my perspective, that's all I'd like to cover. And Tim does a great job of setting it up, and I mean that. So Tim, would you like to set it up and then we'll go from there?
Sure. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for making time on your agenda tonight. I know Jim had stopped by a month or so ago to talk about the Pearly block. This is a vision that Jim started and has included Franklin County Industrial Development on. As many of you know, it's purchasing the building, refurbishing, retail up front, childcare in the back, apartments, and then hopefully some office space as well, either on the third floor or the warehouse area in the back of the building. We've been doing quite a bit of due diligence over the last month to just try to come to a conclusion as to whether this is feasible or not. Jim has worked hard on pulling together the numbers. Myself and my staff have talked to many partners to see what funding opportunities there are for nonprofits. And when we did this, what we found was almost to an individual, people thought this project was wonderful and it checked all the boxes, you know, downtown redevelopment, childcare, housing, all of that. So it's been very well received moving forward. We presented the project to my board this morning, We also presented it to my development committee last week. And our ask today was if they would allocate $25,000 to do additional due diligence, which would include historic preservation and other brownfield paperwork and items like that. So we did get the okay. We do want to move forward. So with that, Jim will take you on a little overview of the numbers, and then we'll go from there if that works for folks.
For me, Tim, and for our job tonight, I think it was just about a month ago. I thought we were both on, but that was with the town. But I believe I came on and I reported what was going on. And what I reported was accurate and still is. All the things that you've heard before from me, I guess, or from Tim tonight are on the path. Today was a big day. That was a chance for Tim's whole board to hear this process. Tim and I also were on the town select board meeting last week, I guess, and that was also well received to a person. And so that was really a good thing. So from a numbers perspective, or from a technical perspective, to maybe affirm some things from you folks, is that Franklin County Industrial Development would be the owner. They would be the tenant. They're a 501c4. They pay taxes. They will be paying property taxes. We build property taxes into the operations budget. Any tenant who leases from us will pay property taxes. So let's, sort of get that one there, sort of up front in a positive way. That we have a budget that right now doesn't work for a private developer. The numbers can't work because of the money that needs to go into the building. And fundamentally, it's a complete gut remodel. Think about the Quincy. So the whole facade gets redone. The windows get replaced. I just realized there's a hesitation here for me, isn't there?
Yeah, a few
Or
seconds.
yeah, there is one, yeah. Yeah, so correct me or slow me down, please. Brand new elevator, all new sprinklers, all new infrastructure, a very, facelift, or that, more than a facelift. Again, all the mechanicals will go into play. So we don't have a break-even budget yet, but we've been sourcing, Tim in particular and Elizabeth are sourcing grants, talking to all those people. I have a working knowledge of historic tax credits, and for Laz and for Tim and for the other group, for Tim and Elizabeth, for this group, the historic consultant that I was trying to track down agreed to do the work in a timely fashion for us. And Laz has said that he will also follow that timeline. So we have a team now to get that first stage to happen. And then it's a $1.8 million project, the whole thing coming together. And we're trying to just knock down the final numbers that the FDIC, pretty close, FCIDC, whatever. We got pretty close to getting that there. And then I think I may be raining on your parade for the moment, but one of the biggest funding sources that at least verbally has been very supportive is the Community Development Block Grant. Elizabeth is waiting for the town and now you both to be asked the question, will you allow us to process a Community Development Block Grant with the support of the town and the village, knowing that the money flows to both of you and then would be sub-granted out to the FDIC. And the current conversation is for that to be $500,000, 400 of it to go to the purchase of the building to defray the cost of the building, which by the way is his asking price. I don't have a problem speaking candidly about these things. He paid $377 12, 15 years ago when he bought that, which was a lot. And well, that's where we are now, and $100,000 to do the fit up for the child care center. Then one more update, then come back to Community Development Block Grant. Tim and Elizabeth also did a really nice video of the building. And Elizabeth, I sent you a note if I could get that. I'm meeting with a regional licensor tomorrow for childcare services in our part of the state, Ellen Livingston. Some of you may know her name. We're meeting tomorrow at 11:30 to do a virtual tour of the building and talk about what we need to do. For me, I'm not concerned at all. We have a giant blank space. Whatever we have to do, we do. There's nothing that's constraining us. We have all the square footage we need. Tim, I'm going to stop for a second and have you come back and affirm that issue that I brought up about the community development block grant piece of it.
John.
So that's really big. That's not a small thing. The Board of Trustees needs to be aware of that. I was not aware that you guys were looking into that grant source or that you would be requesting that the village participate in something like that. That's not a small endeavor. That I've been involved in those a number of times in my career. That's a lot of work. So I've got a few questions related to that. If you are looking at that grant source, the first question is, what is your reasoning of having two different municipalities apply for that? It just seems like that's a really complicated grant source with a ton of administrative work. That's going to be like somebody's 20 to 30 hour a week job for a couple of years, probably, I can see. And I just wonder if having two municipalities be involved in it rather than one might make it more complicated than it needs to be. I don't know if it will or not, but it's a thought I have. And then the second question I have is, have you guys talked with our town's community development director, Sean Caio, about this project? Is he aware of this? Is he being kept in the loop about it? And then the third question I have is, have you thought about who would do the administrative piece on this? And if there is a match requirement, where that match requirement would come from. So I guess that's 4 things, not 3 things.
Yeah, John, I can jump in on that. The purpose for asking village and town is it makes for a stronger application. That's number 1. Number 2, once we got into the discussions, we thought the village would be the lead because they have probably a larger and more capable administrative staff to assist. We can also call on regional planning to help us moving forward as well on that. As far as Sean goes, Sean has been made aware of the project. He's been involved in calls. We have offered to him to participate, but I understand that he is going on paternity leave for 4 to 6 weeks. So we haven't heard anything from him recently. And I believe that the grant does allow for some reimbursement of administrative cost, but we can get back to clarify that.
Elizabeth?
I don't know if you haven't. But so we didn't get into the numbers here tonight. Currently,
Tim,
yes.
Well, now I forgot what I was. They require an administrative cost, an administrative line item. So that is a requirement of the grant that you account for administration.
Okay. Elizabeth in my office, we would write it. Elizabeth just did a successful one to get $1 million for a liter evaporator, and they're wrapping that up as we speak on that one. So I'm sure I'm not sugarcoating it. Sure, there's logistics here that need to be ironed out, but we need to know what the opportunities are. And I will send, I can send to the trustees, I did a list of all of the conversations that we've had to date. So we've talked to USDA, we've talked to Historic Preservation, we've spoken to CDBG, we've spoken to Let's Grow Kids. So we've had many conversations, and as I said earlier, they all believe that this checks all the boxes, and they think it could be a model for the rest of the state. As I said earlier, FCIDC is putting up $25,000 as of today to move this forward, and it'd be great to have the village on board with this. We think, you know, we may be a little biased here, but we think, you know, you've got a space on Main Street that's been idle for 5 years, and we can have an impact on that. We've already had interest in the retail space when it's up and running. So the timeline is we would work through this. We would submit the application. I think it's in June or July for a September board hearing. And the reason we have to wait so long is that we need to find out if we're going to get the tax credits, because if we have approval of the tax credits, that makes for a much stronger application than if we did not have those. So, so that's another piece of the puzzle.
Cindy?
There's two options you might want to look into for resources, either for administrative stuff or financial. The Vermont Association for the Education of Young Children, VTAEYC, or even the National Association for Education of Young Children. I know they are both working very hard for the childcare industry to be recognized as a true profession, and they are working on the financial aspect of that right now. So you might want to look into that, because they know there is a major need for stuff like that in Vermont, and I'm sure would be willing to help.
Thank you for that. To build off from that, the FCIDC Government and Community Affairs Committee is having a presentation from Let's Grow Kids tomorrow to better understand where the needs are relative to childcare as well. So we're doing our homework as to try to make this a top-notch childcare facility.
I think that's awesome.
John, did you?
Sorry about that, John. Just to share on that. So our plan, and I think Jim shared this before, and I'm not sure if everyone was at the meeting, but our plan is not to charge the childcare lease rate. Our plan is to take that savings or require that whoever is in that childcare space to take that savings from paying rent and pass it on to staff through a higher wage and better benefits. I mean, that's the model that people love about this, is we think we can cover the debt service by the apartments, the rental space, and the office space. And if we can pass it on to the childcare, we think the childcare, whichever one is, will, you know, the intent is we'll put out for proposals, but we think whoever moves into that will have, you know, it'll be the place to work for early childcare. The avenue I was going down earlier was that right now, without any assistance, this project comes in at $2,500 a loss per month and about $30,000 for a year. Now, that's where the key is for grants. You know, the CDBG is huge. You know, if you take 500 out of the mix for debt service, we're going to be right there. Historic Preservation Trust has a grant of $100,000. Let's Grow Kids $30,000. USDA has low, and SBA has low income or low interest rate loans, maybe between 2.3 and 2.8%. You know, what we have to look at is what is the length of our debt service. Do we go 20 years? Do we go 25? Do we go 30 to make this work? But and just to fill people in on my board, from your region is Steve Plouffe and Susan Bluen, and both advocated for this wholeheartedly today at our meeting. So we are looking for the assistance, and we're looking for a partnership with the village to make this happen.
Go ahead, John.
So I appreciate all of the work and the effort that you guys have put into this, and I didn't mean to come off sounding negative about it if I did, but if you're going into CDBG, there's a lot involved with that. It's one of the most difficult grant programs I've ever seen in my life anywhere. So, just be prepared for that if you haven't been into it before. And it sounds like there is time to work some of the details out on this that you haven't quite refined yet. If you're looking at a July application, I think you said. So you've got some time to work on that. That's good. So you're not rushed. Somewhere along the way, you're going to need to figure out, who's ultimately going to be responsible for the administrative portion of this. Elizabeth is right. You can put in, or actually, I think, as she said, you're actually supposed to put in monies to pay for administrative costs for whoever ends up administering the grant on behalf of the municipalities. I wonder, though, I can't quite remember on the match requirement. Do you guys remember what the match requirement is on this?
John, I don't believe there is a match. This is more about low to moderate income and where those benefits lie. So the Enosburg comes in on the scale for low and moderate income at 54%. So your households, 54% of them are ranked or labeled as low to moderate income. So that works in our favor for sure. And that's what, when the childcare happens, one of the initiatives or one of the requirements will be that, let's assume it's 40 spaces in the childcare. 21 would have to be reserved for low to moderate income children. So that's where that's where the conversation will be focused. I would say that FCIDC also did a CDBG grant. Between Elizabeth and Connie Burns in my office, Connie handled the one when we got $1 million for CDBG for the Vermont Precision Tools construction of their current building. But I don't want to sugarcoat it. John is right. It's not an easy process, and Elizabeth can attest to that. But I would say that I think the agency has great people. Ann Kroll is wonderful. Patrick Shedd, who we'll be working with, and Josh Hanford. I find them to be very helpful and will assist in any way they can. So that's sort of the saving grace from it being a bear to administer.
So
okay, great, thank you.
You're asking for the village to apply for this, or are you just asking for the village's support?
We're asking for the village to be so all CDBG grants have to go to a community, and then they can be funneled, and then they can be sub-granted to a nonprofit. So we're asking the village to be the applicant on the CDBG application, and then sub-grant it to FCIDC.
Okay, are we still thinking we're going to include the town on this too, or since we're?
Yeah, yes, that would be our whole intent. We think it'd be a stronger application if both communities were, but as I said earlier, I think the village has a stronger team, if you will, and would probably be the lead on the application.
Okay, it sounds like a good project. but it also sounds like it's fairly in depth. So I don't know if it's possible that your staff can get in touch with staff at the village and try to hammer out some details to see if this is even feasible on the administrative end, or do you need an answer tonight?
No, we don't need an answer tonight, but it would, I mean, we have to start the conversation someplace. So, you know, if it's, when do you folks meet again?
Let's see here. The second.
Well, that's actually a topic for later on the agenda, as to whether we're going to have our first meeting in March or wait, which typically is our annual meeting, or wait until the second meeting in March.
Yeah, and that would be fine. I mean, we can, Jim, Elizabeth, and I can sit down. We can put some information together and then get it to Jonathan, and you know, if presented after your annual meeting, if that works.
Yeah, as long as there's no time rush, I'd like to have all of my information first before make any big decisions. Jim, did you have something?
Please. Want to reinforce that there was no expectation on our part that you were going to vote yes tonight. I'm the one that decided, I just chimed in that was something that we needed to talk about for sure. So that's number one. Number two is Tim and his staff and his organization have devoted their time. I've got over 40 hours into this as a volunteer and have a commitment to follow it through to see it get put together. And this is, I can't emphasize enough what a terrific program this can be. You're talking about a nonprofit that's been around for a long time, taking over an underused property, add to the tax base, create jobs, create childcare, keep housing in place. And if we're very fortunate, bring a number of people downtown to buy coffee, to buy food at the stores, to buy food at the restaurants that aren't there now. Franklin South, Northeast, you know, is going to have 24 spaces for staff there, 12 on an average day. This is all a very, very positive thing. And yes, the village will have some responsibility and there'll be some level of headaches. But this is unique in that you have Tim's group doing all the legwork, willing to do all the legwork, put it all together and participate for the long haul. They're not going away. I could go on a really long time, but I'll stop for the moment.
Yeah, let me just jump on that, Jim, a second. So Sam, I can send you my memo that I sent my board relative to all the funding sources and the conversations that we've had. We can start with that. I would also share that this, as John knows, this is not our traditional mission. We're doing a pivot here based on the opportunity. For those who may not be aware of FCIDC, we've been focused on industrial parks, recruiting value-added manufacturing, site location, building buildings, that type of stuff. By entering into the housing sector and childcare, but with that said, we also understand that this is they both fall under economic development. You know, we need childcare for economic development. We heard from the supervisory union that they lose young teachers once they get married and start having kids from this part of the county because there's no childcare. So they tend to locate St. Albans, Chittenden County, wherever they can get a job and then also have stable childcare resources. So this can help that as well. But we feel that you know, the time is right, and I would encourage the trustees to put together a list of questions, send them off to myself or Jim, and we can address those maybe at the whatever meeting we're next up on, and have that conversation.
Yeah, that sounds like a great idea, Tim.
Just want to
So
throw it in
we
there.
can
This is a
reach
really
out.
exciting project. Really
We're,
is.
and to that point, we're excited about it. I mean, my board is made up of 18 individuals, of which 17 attended the meeting today, and it was unanimous. I mean, they are excited about the possibilities of this. You know, not just in the short run, but the long run. And I'm excited because, you know, it's going to have an impact on Enosburg. You know, this opens a door for other models that, you know, everything we talk about is rural economic development, downtown renovation, all of these things. And this is, we're excited about it. And there's no two ways about it.
Just another question.
But with that said, we need your help. So
Have you submitted a copy of this project to the DRB and the zoning office to look over?
no, because we won't be able to do anything until that September timeframe. But you know, we can. That's no problem at all. We've been focused on numbers more than anything else at this stage.
Jim?
I have spoken with Angela about this, and no flags have been raised. I have a meeting with her tomorrow at 1 o'clock to talk about 2 or 3 things related to zoning issues in the community, and that's one of them.
Okay, perfect. That's what I was wondering. Okay. Well, I think we have a plan. Is there anything else you guys want to talk about, or any more questions for tonight?
I don't have any. I will, Sam, I'll send you my list of potential resources, and then we'll touch base with John and get your questions and go from there.
Perfect.
But I want to thank you for putting us on the agenda and having the conversation.
And thank you for everything that you've done so far. I'm sure I'm looking forward to this.
Very exciting.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you all.
I'm going
Have
to
a good
sign
night.
out, and I'll talk to you next meeting, okay? Thank you.
Have a good night, everyone. Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye.
Jim, is that all for Municipal Initiative, or is there other stuff?
For now, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Let's move on to VTrans Annual Municipal Highway Plan.
So this is more a piece of housekeeping item. This is something we are required to do every year for VTrans. You'll see in your packets a financial plan that Gary Denton had put together. Basically, it's a list of different projects that the village is planning on working on or completing during the current year, 2021, with budget amounts built into there so that VTrans can see the amount of money that the municipality is reinvesting in its highway infrastructure. And they use this partly to base what their financial assistance amount is that they give to us on an annual basis. Every year we get some financial assistance from VTrans, which is supposed to go towards highway improvements within our community. But this is part of what they use to base the amount of money that they give us financial assistance on. And so we submit this to VTrans every year. It does need to be signed by the Board of Trustees. So you guys need to approve this at the meeting tonight. And then when you're able to, if you can come into the office, or if you need me to run this around, or we can have Gary maybe do it, either one. If that makes it more palatable for people to get your signatures, we can do that too. Just let us know. So, and that's it.
John, when does this need to be approved by?
If you can approve it tonight, that would be good. If you don't feel like you can do that, we'll put it on our next meeting.
Okay, I just had a question, but it's slightly sensitive. It should probably be discussed in executive, but it's not crucial to this, so we can accept it and move forward, or if there's time to discuss it and then accept it after, then either way works with me.
Okay, whatever your preference is, I guess.
I think we can just accept it. Yeah, we can just accept it as is, and I'll let you guys know what I was thinking later.
Okay,
I
A
motion to accept.
it.
All right, we have Jason and Cindy with a tie. I guess Cindy with the first. Jason, you want to take the second?
Sure.
All those in favor of accepting this, say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. All right, that's unanimous. Up next, we have informational meeting March 3rd, 2021 for process and procedures. And tonight we have Pat Hayes with us. I think this is his item. Good evening, Pat.
You're
yeah,
muted.
you're on mute, Pat. So I think Pat is actually going to be more of a participant,
Okay.
although he may join in at times. Matt Miner a couple of weeks ago had attended a workshop on this item specifically that was held by Vermont League of Cities and Towns. And through that workshop, there were a number of things that were brought up procedurally that are different than what we would normally do at an annual meeting being held from the floor. And so it seemed like a good idea, maybe before our informational meeting to just sort of go through some of these procedural differences, which I think Matt and Pat may be able to chime in on some of this stuff too. We'll run through with the board, just so everybody's on the same page, when we get into the meeting next week, and we at least kind of know what we're doing, and people won't be going, boy, these guys are pretty unorganized here, what's happening? So Matt, if you want to start the discussion on this.
Absolutely. Thanks, John. I would say that the biggest difference that I can share with the group after having gone through this training provided by VLCT and VRCD is that unlike a typical informational meeting where you might be addressing one or two specific items that are on an Australian ballot issue, for instance, the last couple of years, we've had Australian ballot items for road paving projects. And the informational meeting associated with that has been limited strictly to whatever that special item is on the Australian ballot. Because this year's annual meeting is entirely Australian ballot, as you know, we need to give the voters the same opportunity to review, ask questions, and offer perspectives on all of the items that are being approved by or not approved by voters in the ballot process, the Australian ballot process. That includes the articles that normally would be handled from the floor in our annual meeting. A couple of things that the attorneys with VLCT wanted to emphasize and make sure that all the municipalities that maybe aren't as familiar with this process understand is that number one, this is a meeting not about making decisions. It's not unlike an annual floor meeting where you actually have folks voting on the articles that are being presented after you're discussing. There's no voting taking place in this informational meeting. So the process that sometimes can occur in a discussion in a public hearing that might result in a debate with people offering different points of view about whether an item should or should not be approved by voters can sidetrack the meeting. So they offer the suggestion that you set some clear rules right up front for the meeting to help make sure that those who want to share a perspective have the opportunity to do so in as equitable a fashion as possible. So one of the things that they suggest perhaps is establishing time limits for folks who wish to speak, and or even considering the possibility of once a person has shared, that they not chime back in again until everyone else has had an opportunity to share their opinions on the first round before somebody comes back and kind of chimes back in again with additional comments. Couple of other recommendations, making sure that there's enough people participating in the facilitation of this electronic meeting to make sure that you can control who's given the floor and how to handle things if they start to go astray. One of the things that you may all have experienced in the past is sometimes if topics are emotional and important to folks, they can things can become heated, and sometimes people will resort to behaviors that are not conducive to a constructive, open exchange of ideas, and you might result with people making personal attacks or coming back around to the same items repeatedly. And so they suggest that the board have some idea in mind about how you want to handle those situations if they occur. One of the things that the VRCD staff recommended after having done a number of these kind of large public meetings in an electronic format is having some kind of a warning system for folks. So if people are kind of stepping out of the bounds of what the board sees as acceptable behavior, to give people a verbal warning, and then to give them a mute result if that's still not solving the problem. And then, kind of a last case scenario would be removing that person from the electronic forum. But you don't want to have to resort to that because you want to make sure that people have had the chance to participate openly and freely. But you also have to make sure that everybody has a chance to do that without any unruly behavior that's preventing others from that opportunity. They do suggest that you can do a run through of a meeting, and it doesn't have to be publicly warned. As long as you're not discussing business, you're not conducting any business, taking any actions as board, you can actually schedule and hold a mock meeting scenario so that folks can practice the process. And that's not subject to the normal public meeting notice requirements because it's not considered a public meeting of the board if all you're doing is training the meeting process. They did recommend that we post an agenda which lists the items that are going to be discussed in the information hearing. John did that, and we posted that on our website and our physical postings today. So that's out for folks to see, and basically that lists the articles that are being addressed on the ballot, so that folks know what the informational meeting is going to discuss. Another thing about kind of procedure is the minutes to this meeting need to identify anyone who speaks and shares comments on an item. So we have to have a process of making sure that we capture from folks who is speaking when they're given the floor. So their recommendation obviously is to suggest that people, when they're granted the floor, start with announcing their name and their place of residence before they begin with their public comments, so that the minute taker has the opportunity to capture that information and attribute those comments to the right people. That's kind of a bullet of items that I took away from it that I thought might be important for the board to hear, and might differ from some of the setting that we've seen in the past for informational hearing.
John?
I think there was one other item that's relevant to the procedures as well that I just wanted to bring up, which is that unlike the annual meeting that's conducted from the floor, this is actually a Board of Trustees meeting, and it sort of still works within that framework as a Board of Trustees meeting. And I think, Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think at the beginning of the meeting, you will want to assign the moderator, who's Pat Hayes here tonight, the authority to moderate the meeting, because it's actually considered a board meeting rather than the annual meeting being done from the floor. Or you can run it yourselves. I mean, Sam, I think in this case, if you wanted to, you could run it as chair the way you do a normal meeting. My guess is you probably don't want to do that, but if you do, you can do it. But if you don't want to run the meeting as chair, the board simply needs to make a motion to assign Pat to moderate the meeting right at the beginning before it gets started. Did I summarize that about right, Matt?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Other things kind of from a procedural perspective, there's a recommendation. We don't really know how many folks are going to join this meeting and wish to participate. As you get more and more participants in a Zoom setting, it can be distracting for folks who are engaged in the meeting process to be managing the participants and the facilitation of the meeting. So they recommend that you have clear roles assigned and that you have enough people to handle what's kind of going on from a logistics standpoint. So there's somebody that is able to monitor the hand raising process and make sure that the moderator or the chair have good cues for who's wishing to speak and can handle that granting of the floor process. Also, the ability to monitor chat if that is active. We're not required to have chat available during this, but some folks believe that it's a good enhancement of the process. Other folks prefer not to have that distraction in place. I think that for a lot of people that are less comfortable with necessarily speaking on video and out loud, sometimes being able to ask a question in the chat, and then whomever is moderating the meeting can read that question out loud and then give an opportunity for the board to address those questions or staff. So chat can be useful, but if you're going to use it, it needs to be monitored and controlled in a way that, is effective so that folks aren't expecting answers to their questions in the chat, not getting them because they're not noticed.
I've also noticed chat being helpful for participants to communicate with each other rather than taking up airspace. They can go on chat.
Yeah, and that's a double-edged sword. There's a lot of controversy around the chat room in regards to public meetings. I've actually had some discussions with some attorneys about this, and there's a lot of municipalities that are not using this correctly and are, according to some of the attorneys I've spoken with, are probably very lucky they haven't been sued because of some of the things that have been going on in the chat space. One of the things that I found very disturbing about the chat room when I've been involved in some public meetings is that people will put things in there that can be very damaging to other folks, either in the community or to the public officials that are in attendance at the meeting. And it's, if you've got somebody giving bad information or outright lying about circumstances of things in the chat room, and as a public official, you're sitting there reading this in the chat room, but no, that's not the proper forum to address an issue like that. Puts you in a very bad situation. And that's something that I have seen happen in chat rooms in public meetings in this community. And I know that it's happened in communities all over Vermont. Another thing that has happened in chat rooms that is absolutely not supposed to be happening is you will sometimes have public officials having conversations with other people from the public in the chat room. That's absolutely not supposed to be happening. Sometimes you've also had situations where board members are having conversations with each other in the meeting, in the chat room, while other people are talking. And that again is absolutely not supposed to be happening. So there's, there's a lot, if you're going to allow the chat room as an option, there's a lot that you need to keep your eye on. It's, it's a different kind of tool, and it's, it's potentially there's things that can happen that can be damaging to the meeting as a result of people misusing that technology. It's like anything, like any kind of technology we have now. This is new to us, a year ago. I mean, how many people had really used stuff like this before in a public setting? I think very few. And we've had to try to adapt to it. And, as we've tried to adapt to it, people have manipulated the technologies in ways that were, not really thought about before. So, I throw this out there just for food for thought. If you do want to have chat room available as an option, we need to keep good tabs on it. But you don't have to have it. You can just, not have chat room as an option in the meeting as well.
Go ahead, Heather.
If we do decide to allow for chat, we can, there's a feature where you make it so that you can only chat with the host. So it's public to everybody, and you can't have private chats. So that could eliminate some of the concern that John was raising, because I definitely understand and agree with a lot of those concerns. So that's something. I'm not certain how I feel about the chat being available, because Matt also makes some really good points about it. It empower some people to be able to speak. If we do also have the chats, because since not everybody can see the screen, whoever reads it we'd have to just make sure that we let people know that it's not anonymous, that we would be stating who they are along with the statement that they typed.
I think that sounds like the better option, just being able to communicate with the host.
Yeah, and just to reinforce for the board, chat has been available in our meetings, our regular meetings for the board, and it is limited to chat directly to the host. It's all folks, but no private chat is allowed between participants. That's already been established as a basic security feature.
Okay, so how would this look? Matt, would you be the host and Pat would be the moderator?
Yeah, my willingness to continue to facilitate the meeting and help with the technical aspects of it, it might be helpful if we had another individual who could help to monitor the raised hand functions in the participant panel in the chat area, and perhaps perhaps someone else from our staff or even our minute taker might be willing to participate at that level. I don't know. Just having another pair of eyes, and perhaps Sam, if you actually delegate the moderation function to Patrick, then maybe you can also be co-hosting and willing to monitor what's going on, especially if you're controlling any of the messaging that goes to the moderator for who's queuing up for raised hands, etc. That reminds me, one other thing that they recommended was it's helpful to let people know who's on deck when you're taking questions. So if you've got a list of 3 people with hands raised, it's helpful to let them know ahead of time kind of what order they're coming, so that people know before you give them the floor that they're next in line, so that they can go through the process of getting unmuted and prepared. Cuts down on some of the delays as you hand the floor over to new folks.
Okay, yeah, I can help out in any way, especially if, well, who would be calling on people if they have the hands raised? The moderator or chair?
Totally
Well,
your
it
guys'
should be-
decision.
Should be the moderator. I mean, that's what the moderator's doing. He's moderating the meeting, directing the course of discussion and who's going to be talking and, what order the people are going to be called in.
And feel free if you'd be willing to. But if you're not comfortable with running the meeting, then I can too. It's up to whoever. I'm up for whatever. I think
You're on mute, Pat.
So can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. So I would be willing to do that, to run the meeting as the moderator, and you could be helping Matt as far as people in the queue that are waiting to speak on any given issue. And that would be fine with me.
Okay, perfect. That sounds like a plan.
If I could make another suggestion, that sounds like a good approach, and perhaps Sam, you'd like to take the lead on letting Pat know when there's a question from the chat and be the person who reads those out.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay, I think we have a plan set. Is there anything else we need to talk about for the informational meeting?
I think you've covered most of the things that I was interested in sharing. I don't know if other board members have questions or concerns about, what this is going to look like or what their role is going to be.
So just to recap, we're going to have chat available, but only to the host, correct?
Correct.
And Pat will be the moderator, and me and Matt will be assisting him in letting him know whose hands are raised and who has a question, such and such. Okay.
Now, Matt, have they considered a run through on this? Did they think that was a good idea?
There weren't any recommendations about whether you needed to or should do that, but they wanted to make sure that municipalities understood that if you wanted to do that, if the board would feel more comfortable practicing some of those processes, that you're allowed to do that and you don't have to go through a normal meeting notification process as long as you don't conduct any business.
Right.
So what would happen if someone from the community wanted to add a line item? Being Australian ballot, would we need to include that, or there is not a line item of it? Sure.
Yeah,
You
it's not
cannot
an
do that.
option.
It's not an option.
Okay.
So our role is really just to answer questions. That's all. Okay.
That's basically what this information meeting is about. Answering questions that people have pertaining to the agenda.
And hearing your voters' perspectives.
Correct.
Right. And the agenda is the articles. I don't know if you guys had a chance to look at the agenda that was sent out, but the agenda is what's on the warning for
Correct.
articles. And that's all we will be talking about, nothing else.
Historically, participation has been pretty minimum at these information meetings, but since it is the only time that members of the public are going to be able to speak directly, well, not the only time, but it's essentially going to be town meeting. So we'll see what happens as far as turnout.
I will say that we've seen much more activity from the request for ballots in advance than we ever have in the past. So I think there's a strong indicator that folks that normally would attend the annual meeting are, interested in still participating in the process. And I think there's a high probability that you'll see more participation in this informational hearing.
Do you know how many absentee ballots are up to yet?
I don't know the exact number, but I'm going to guess it's around 20 at this point. Historically, we've never seen more than maybe 4 in any given year.
Right. And usually public turnout's been about what, 40?
About 40, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
All right. So we have a plan for the information meeting. Now let's talk about March 9th, 2021 trustee meeting.
Yeah, so I put a memo in you guys' packet on this. As you guys are aware, under normal conditions, the first board meeting in March is typically our annual meeting. But because of the pandemic and the fact that we're doing this by Australian ballot now, March 9th, which would be our normal meeting for annual meeting, is not actually going to be an annual meeting. It is going to be, however, the day that votes are due within the community, and we still will have a physical polling place as is required under state statute, and people will have until 7 p.m. That evening of March 9th to cast their ballots. So I hadn't, it occurred to me last week, you know, I think in my mind, I had been assuming kind of all along that we were not going to have a meeting on March 9th, and that meeting was just going to be canceled. But I realized we never actually really talked about it. And so I wanted to bring it up and see what you guys' thoughts were about it. There are a couple of reasons, I guess, I can think not to have the meeting, but ultimately the choice is yours, of course, as the board. And the two things that I can think of are, as I mentioned previously, the polls are open till 7 p.m. and our meetings start at 6:30 p.m. So prior to the polls being closed. And it is possible, although I think unlikely, and I'm not expecting it, that the incumbents that are running for their positions, you know, might for some reason not be elected. If, you know, someone came out of the blue somewhere and, you know, did a write-in campaign or something unexpectedly. It's unlikely, I'm not expecting that, but I guess it's conceivable. And if that were to happen, and the board were holding a meeting that evening, it would create some problems, because then any actions that those members took the night of that meeting could be challenged if they were actually not reelected, and the people that were elected were not present at that Board of Trustees meeting. It could sort of nullify the entire meeting. Again, I'm not saying that's going to happen. I'm not expecting that, but in a strange world, I guess it's conceivable that could happen. The other thing is, I wonder if maybe it won't just create more confusion in the community during a time in which we already have, you know, kind of a lot of confusion and stress about a lot of different things going on in our world and our society. If on the day that, you know, votes are being casted for our annual meeting, the board is also conducting a regular meeting at the same time, because that would be a regular meeting. It wouldn't be the annual meeting. So that's, I guess, you know, a couple of reasons why I think maybe it would be a good idea not to hold the meeting. But, you know, if you guys have a different feeling about it, then you should say so. And ultimately, it's your call as to whether you want to try and hold a meeting on March 9th or just cancel it.
So how would we get the results of the meeting? Because I'm assuming you're going to start counting the votes at 7, right? Andy would be doing that. So how would we be notified of the results of each Australian ballot item?
Well, we don't know yet. I mean, Andy, you can go to the polls, and if you're there at the polls, then you'll find out right there when they've got it counted. However, you know, you just need to be cognizant of the social distancing requirements and stuff. So if they had, you know, a packed room in there, you may not want to be in there. There may not be room to be in there, but that's a pretty big room in the emergency services building, which is where our polls are being conducted. So, you know, my guess is there would be space enough in there if you wanted to go in there and get the results immediately after Andy's counted all of the ballots.
Right, just because typically we would get the results during town meeting. Village.
Right. Typically, the way we do it here with the Village of Enosburg Falls, before our annual meeting is over, Andy has already counted the votes and announces them, during the meeting.
The new person doesn't start that instant, right? They have to take the oath and everything.
They would have to take the oath, that's correct, but I think if they've won, would be effective that day, essentially. And I know it's very strange because, this has never happened before. We're not having a traditional annual meeting, and the annual meeting is, normally falls on what would be a regular meeting day. So how do you handle that? And that's the question. What do you guys want to do about it? Do you want to just cancel that March 9th meeting, which normally would have been our annual meeting, but since the annual meeting isn't happening, I guess it's conceivable. It could be a regular board meeting if you wanted other business you wanted to conduct in a regular meeting, or do you just want to just cancel it and, just carry on and have your meeting in March, the second meeting in March, which is what we typically would do, because the first meeting in March, we typically is our annual meeting. So we're not conducting any other business. We're just conducting the annual meeting.
Which we're having next week. So
I'm okay with moving it to March 23rd.
yeah, I am too.
Yeah. We don't usually conduct business like you said anyway, so.
No,
It
it's
makes
just
sense just to not have it.
I agree.
And to your question, Sam, I think that staff would be perfectly happy to get announcements out to the board as shortly after the results are available from the clerk on the results of the Australian voting. And we can do that via email or phone calls.
Would it be appropriate to post onto our website?
Absolutely.
I'm sure other people would be curious as to what the results of the meeting.
And I believe that those results are turned into the Secretary of State as well.
Okay. Yeah.
Which we still don't have pictures and bios up on the website.
I was just thinking that.
Okay, so it sounds like the board all agrees that we can just hold off on that on a regular meeting in for our annual meeting.
Do we need to make a motion for that?
Yeah, that would be good if someone could make a motion to that effect.
Oh, I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
Cindy with the second. All those in favor of not holding our normal second Tuesday meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Okay. So we got a plan. All right, up next we have manager's report.
Okay, I think this will be pretty quick. First thing, just wanted to let you guys know that the Vermont League of Cities and Towns announced this week that its board of directors has appointed Edward Brady as the league's new executive director. Ted Brady is currently serving as Deputy Secretary of the Vermont Agency of Commerce and Community Development. Excuse me. He'll assume his new post in early April. And Ted is replacing Maura Carroll, who had been in that position for about 5 years, and Maura has decided to retire this year. So our best to Carol as she leaves VLCT. She's been a very good executive director, and best of luck to her, and welcome Ted Brady. In the back of the manager's report, you will see attached a letter from the State of Vermont Transportation Board regarding the permitting of helipads and airstrips. Apparently, this is a much overlooked area in most municipalities' zoning regulations, and the state is apparently, according to the letter, seeing an uptick in private airfield applications, and their concern is that most municipalities in the state don't have any zoning regulations to deal with, private helipads or airstrips. And so they sent this letter around to all the municipalities in Vermont, just saying, hey, you may want to think about this. So I did forward this letter on to Angela Wright, our zoning administrator, so she could take a look at it. And I assume she'll also be sharing this with the Development Review Board as well. And if they feel some action should be taken on this, then they may be coming to talk with the Board of Trustees and or the Select Board about that. Although I kind of think it would probably be more of a town issue. It'd be kind of, can't think of too many places in the village where you could put an airstrip in. Maybe there probably are some places if somebody got creative.
Can flatten my barn and put a helipad up there.
Yeah, right. Well, maybe a helipad. Yeah.
There's 2 runways in the town at least.
Yeah.
One of the dairy center.
Yeah, that's right. There actually, I was told a long time ago, there used to be an active airstrip over by the dairy center, but that is in the town as opposed to the village. And I imagine probably in the town, it could be a little bit more of an issue, but you never know. So I just wanted to let you know, I did pass this along to Angela, and hopefully she'll give it to the DRB. And if they feel they want to come to talk with the trustees about it, I imagine we'll hear from them. And then just one last thing, I realize we have talked a lot tonight about the informational meeting next week on a number of different areas, but I just want to ask one more time, is there anything else? Does anybody have any other questions or concerns or anything having to do with the informational meeting? Remember, that's going to be next Wednesday, March 3rd.
That was at 6:30.
At 6:30, yeah. And if you can't think of anything right now, don't hesitate to give me a call or give Matt a call, and we'll do our best to find the answer to that question. It actually helps us as staff if people ask us different questions, things that are on their mind. It not only helps us prepare for what people might be thinking about, but also gets our wheels turning in some different motions that maybe we're not thinking about as individuals, and we need to be thinking about, but we're not aware of it, which can happen sometimes. I've had meetings where I thought for sure, oh, this topic is going to be the hot topic for this year's annual meeting. I know it is. And when we got to that article in the warning, nothing, no questions at all. But then some other article, there were 3 or 4 questions on it, and I thought that article was going to be no big deal at all. So it always helps us if people come up with different questions, things that are on their mind. Right now, I have heard from nobody at all. I've not received one phone call or anything from anybody about any of the articles at all. So if you do get approached by someone and you don't know the answer to something, tell them to give me a call so we can find the answer to it. Okey doke.
Sounds good.
All right. And I think that's it for manager's report.
Okay, thank you, John. All right, before we go into executive, does anyone have any other business? Hearing none, I will hear a motion to enter executive session for the purpose of discussing a personnel item.
A motion to enter.
I'll second that.
Jason with the second, / Leonard. Everyone in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed, nay. Okay, let's head over to executive. Okay, it looks like we have everybody back from executive. There was no action taken. So if nobody has any other business, I'll hear a motion to adjourn.
I make the
Motion.
motion, we adjourn.
I'll second.
Okay, I heard Ladder with the first, Jason with the second. All those in favor of adjourning, say aye.
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 Those nay. Okay. Everyone have a good evening.